All right. So in today's webinar, we're going to talk about contact hygiene, duplicate prevention, and merging records. So we're going to cover a lot in this and basically just keeping your database tidy. So that's basically the goal for today. So we're going to start with contact hygiene. And these are just some business logic rules to kind of help keep an eye on things. And we're going to find those in the main menu under hygiene rules. So this isn't where we necessarily tell the system what a duplicate is. This is just some common scenarios to watch out for where the system can notify you. So this is going to play hand in hand with our duplicate prevention rules. So here we have our hygiene rules. It's just a series of yes/no questions, basically. By default, your system is going to have this disabled. So you're going to want to come in here and probably enable it, and then just pick the options that you want. Now, the names more or less tell you that, but let's go through them. So number one, prompt user to add relationship if the email or address matches with an existing contact. So what this means is if I add Eric Metzler and put my physical address in there, all right, and then I later on add Taylor Metzler and put the same physical address in there, well, it's going to notice that the address is shared with another contact. So it's going to say, hey, do you want to create a relationship between these two people? So this is a way that you can basically catch family members that you didn't realize you already had. Same with the email address for those family members who share emails. It will still let you create the address, the other user. You're just going to get the option to link them. Same thing, but for work. So if I create Nonprofit Easy in the database and put our business address in there, and then I create my record and add the same business address to my addresses. It's going to say, hey, there's a match here. Do you want to add Eric as an employee of Nonprofit Easy? So once again, just another tool to help you build those connections. While adding a duplicate contact if the email matches with an existing contact of the same name. So what this is going to do is if you add Eric Metzler with Eric Metzler at nonprofiteasy.com, and then you go in later and you add Eric Metzler with Eric Metzler at nonprofiteasy.com, it's going to say, hey, you've probably got a duplicate here. Do you want them to be the same contact? Do you actually mean to edit that one? So a bit of duplicate prevention, very specific type. And similarly, do you want to prompt the user to merge those two contacts together? So just another step in that process. And this is kind of the old way we did it. We'll get to specify more automatic options in a few minutes. The fifth option, so if you're adding a household relationship and there's a conflict between communications profiles because we only want to send to one person in the household, do we prompt you about that conflict when you enter the data or every 24 hours? Basically, we'll send you an email about it. So don't actually see this one used too often. I just leave it on for my own reasons. So this one's up to you. But this one, number 6, this is probably the coolest one. So what this does is it will actually verify and normalize addresses in your system. So it's not going to. So what it's going to do is when you enter an email address, a physical address in the system, we can on either data entry or every 24 hours, run a check of those addresses against a third-party service, specifically Smarty Streets or a US geocoder, and see, does that address exist? Is there a physical address there, a building, basically? It won't verify the person lives there, but it will verify that the address exists. It is mailable. So I'm actually going to show you how to set this one up for Smarty Streets. It's a free service. They also have a alternate account type for nonprofits that gives you even more lookups per month. Actually, I think it's like 25,000 lookups a year or something like that, something way up there. So what you would go ahead and do is select Smarty Streets, and then you go to smartystreets.com, and so what it looks like right now, they've changed their site recently, and you'd sign up for an account. Now I already have an account signed up, so I'm going to go ahead and log into that account. I already logged in previously. We're going to go to API keys, And if you don't have one already, generate a new key. And so I have two keys here. And we're going to take the auth ID and the auth token and put it into the appropriate fields in Nonprofit Easy, and then save. And so going forward, depending on what you did here, you'll either get a little pop-up that says, hey, do you want to verify this address? Basically, yes or no. Here's actually not yes or no, excuse me. It's going to say, here's what we suggest based on what you've entered. Or it'll say, you know what, let me try again in case it doesn't have a suggestion or you don't like it. Or it'll say, you know what, ignore what Smarty Street says. I know it's right. Put it in here. And that's going to probably happen with certain rural addresses, or maybe stuff that's not quite in the Smarty Street system yet. But any questions on this page? I want to take the opportunity. Okay, so that's hygiene rules. I'm going to go ahead and show off the Smarty Streets, by the way, real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and add a contact just so we can see that in action. So contacts, add individual. And I need an address. I will make one up that's nearby. So this is, screen share is slowing down. Charles Kent. I don't know, making up names. And we're going to give him the address, 1400 Valley House Drive, zip code 949. Let Chrome fill that in for me, and save. And so we get this verifying address, and it's going to give our thoughts. Nope, use what I typed, or I know it's wrong, let me fix it. So so I went ahead and cleaned it up. The normalization part of address verification is going to make sure that instead of being drives and DRs and stuff like that, it's going to keep everything kind of the same, so that all your emails, all your physical addresses in the system will have a consistent format. So that's the other side of the address normalization. So submit, and that's that. If I had put in 1300, which is where we actually are, it would have noticed that, hey, we have all these duplicates and set off the hygiene. But okay, so let's move on to duplicate prevention. So we're going to go back to the main menu and manage duplicates. Some of you may have noticed that recently there was a change in this menu that is going to be affected here, in that duplicate prevention settings have disappeared from the settings menu and is now part of manage duplicates. So we're going to start there, actually on prevent. And what you do here is you basically say, what do you consider a duplicate? So this is an and statement. All these things must match for something to be considered a duplicate. So an individual contact must have the same name, last name, and email to be considered a duplicate. So if I enter Eric Metzler with my company email into the system, and then someone else tries to enter it in, its system's going to go, hey, duplicate. Or if you're using public pages and you've entered Eric Metzler in on the back end with this information, and then I go to the public site, you're in public pages, and enter in the same information, Eric Metzler with the same email, it's going to say, hey, this person's creating a profile online. Turns out they match this existing profile on the back end. So they must be the same person based on these rules here. So it's important to get these set up early and properly. I have seen some people just leave it off. What that will do is I would then end up with one Eric Metzler I created on the back end, and one that created on the front end with the same name and email. So I usually recommend do first name, last name, email, or first name, last name, address, because this will, because first name, last name on its own isn't necessarily going to catch people who happen to have the same name. If we have two John Smiths, those are two separate people. And it's a very common name, turns out. And there are other Eric Metzlers out there, I've discovered. And it wouldn't catch those. Or actually, it would catch those, and it would merge them inappropriately. Excuse me. But there should only be one Eric Metzler out there with my email. Further, this will still allow you to have two different people share an email address. So if my wife and I shared an email, which she often uses my email for signing up for things, then it would let her have her own separate record but still use my email address. Perfectly valid. So things to consider. Organization is just based on organization name. So character length. What's that? How does that come into play? That basically says how many characters should we match. I usually leave this blank, but if you set this to some length, then it would match, for example, Eric John and Eric John's son, if I set it for like 4 characters for the last name, because 4 of the characters of the last name, John, the John part, are matching in Eric John and Eric Johnson. So something to keep an eye out for with your character lengths. Otherwise, nothing more to be really said there. So any questions about this step? Okay, so duplicate prevention out of the way. Now, theoretically, this should prevent any duplicates from existing. But obviously, it's not going to catch everything. Because if I have Eric Metzler in the back end with my work email, and I sign up on Pages with my personal, there's no match. So I'm going to have a duplicate. Same with various other situations. That's the most common one. Or if you don't get an email or something of that nature, you'll get duplicates. So for that, we have the review process. And it looks like someone cleared out most of my examples. Phooey. Oh, cool. That's awesome. So our first step here is our search preferences. This is an OR statement. These are the things that we look at for determining potential duplicates. So first name, last name, org name, email, address, zip, things of that nature. And who gets the notification? Admin wise. So it would appear that maybe I got a search in progress. That's why it's, oh, I've got duplicates. That's why it's not letting me change it. So this is basically saying, okay, these are the things to look out for. So names and emails, if those match, even if they're not part of our duplicate prevention rules, let us know about it so that we can review those for potential duplication or emails and address matches, things of that nature. So save and close that. And so that's where we get these options here. These are cases where we have people who have names, emails, and addresses that all match, or names and emails that match, or names and addresses, or emails and addresses that match. So unfortunately, someone used my examples here I wanted to use, but no worries. I have a small database, not a lot of duplicates. So we're going to go to the email address match options. And it looks like here we've got 2 contacts for Dan Wayne that are possible matches. Now, if we had 3 or 4 or 5, they'd all be under the same name. And so at this point, we go ahead and review the details. So you always want to review the details. So here we have Dan Wayne and his potential duplicates. So we have Mr. Dan Wayne and Juan Jones. Well, okay, those names are very different, but we discover that they do share an address and an email. So maybe Juan Jones is an alias that Dan goes by. Maybe he recently changed his name. Maybe it's a nickname. Maybe it's a stage name. I don't know. So what do we do from here? Well, first thing we could do is they're not duplicates. Maybe Juan Jones is the adoptive son of Dan Wayne, and that's why they have the same address, and he just happens to use Dan's email, his dad's email. So maybe this is totally legit. So we can mark these not duplicate. They won't come up again. Or maybe they are duplicates. So maybe Juan Jones was just someone totally messed up entering data on the back end. So what we do here is we say, okay, well, what do we want to keep from each record? But so donations, memberships, events, stuff like that will all be ready to be merged automatically. But contact information sometimes takes the human touch. So we can say, well, of these 2 names, we know Juan Jones is a mistake. So we're going to go with Mr. Dan Wayne. And of the billing addresses, well, they're the same, to be honest. So we'll just take Dan's. Mailing. There is no billing address for Juan, so let's use Dan's. How about phone numbers? So we might have information from both sides that we'd be borrowing. In the case of the phone numbers, we could take from both sides, and the same with email. Maybe we had different emails on both sides. I'm just going to take it from one. Same with communication preferences and the created on date. So we're just going to basically pick what information we want. It is possible that we might end up with, say, two Dan Waynes and Juan Jones, and Juan Jones is a separate contact, in which case merge separately would allow us kind of separate them out. So we could uncheck those we don't want. But I'm going to go ahead and just merge these two. Basically nothing from Juan Jones is being taken, so we're basically just getting rid of Juan Jones. And I'm going to go next. Here's what's going to result. And then save and merge next. So what this is going to do is it's going to set this one to be merged, and we'll move on to the next contact, of which we don't have any. So save and merge next. So it gives us our notice of everything that's going to be, and we can get an email when it's done. Now the merge process doesn't happen instantly. This is an important thing to know, because that would just take time. We'd have to wait for it to complete before we can continue on. So what the system does is it basically takes these two contacts, flags them, and it will merge them tonight. So when we come in tomorrow morning, they'll be merged together. If I go ahead and add donations or memberships to either records, we'll be fine. So merge now, well, more like set to be merged, and we're done. So those two records will merge tonight, and we can move on to the next record. The search for duplicates, going back a little bit, can be set for either weekly or monthly, or we can set off a search right now. So, any questions about that process? Any at all? Okay, so the last thing is merge history. So this gives you a history of all your merges you've done, and we'll eventually have a merge by column as well to let you know what user did the merge. And so basically it just says, what was the merge status? It was merged based on the name and email, merged on this date, total numbers merged. We can review this just to see what we did and what it was created by. And just to kind of, if we say, wait, there's a missing contact somewhere. This will let us know what we did, or in this case, it's pending. So, all right, so that's all I got for that.